ready for a deep dive into 16th century alchemy.
Let's do it.
Our guide today is Sir Edward Kelly and his work, The Stone of the Philosophers. This guy wasn't messing around.
No, Kelly was not. He was deep into trying to crack the code of matter itself, really going back to the roots of a centuries-old tradition.
Talk about treasure. So where do we even begin with something as complex as alchemy?
Well, Kelly gives us a pretty good starting point, those three kingdoms of nature: animal, vegetable, and mineral. They saw these as the fundamental building blocks of, well, everything.
It's kind of cool how this idea of interconnectedness pops up right away.
Absolutely. Animals need plants and minerals. Plants get their nutrients from the earth and minerals themselves. They form through processes within the earth. Alchemists, they were really captivated by this constant back and forth, this transformation happening all around.
Which leads us right to the heart of alchemy, that idea of chaos. But I'm guessing we're not talking about just a messy desk drawer here.
Not quite. Think more like a primordial soup. You know, the universal matter, the stuff everything came from. That's chaos. Pure potential just waiting to be unleashed.
Okay, so what are the key ingredients in this alchemical soup? Let me guess. Those four familiar elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
Bingo. But here's the thing. Alchemists, they saw them a bit differently than we do now. Each element had these specific qualities that determined how it behaved, how it interacted with everything else. Fire. That meant heat, obviously. Water, coldness. Air represented humidity, and good old earth, that symbolized dryness.
So far, so good. But how did they get from these basic elements to the idea of real, actual transformation?
It all comes down to motion. They knew those elemental qualities. They weren't just static. They were in a sort of cosmic dance, always interacting. Fire, with its heat, naturally rises and influences the air around it. Water, being cold, tends to sink, mixing with the earth.
Like a giant cosmic dance of opposites.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting. They went beyond just those basic qualities and started categorizing the elements by their roles in this big dance, active or passive.
I bet those terms had some different baggage back then.
No, for sure. I got to be careful with that language. They weren't thinking in modern terms. Actor elements were the doers, the ones making things happen: fire and water, always on the move. Earth and air, more chill, more receptive. They were the passive ones.
So fire heats, water cools active change. Earth and air are more like the background where the changes happen. It's interesting how even this simple categorization starts to hint at a deeper understanding of these natural processes.
And here's where it gets even wilder. Alchemists took this active-passive thing a step further and started comparing them to male and female principles.
Oh boy, now we're getting into some interesting territory. What do they even mean by male and female elements?
Gotta remember the historical context here. They were trying to understand really complex stuff with the knowledge and culture they had at the time.
Right, no judgment from us. We're just trying to get inside their heads for a bit.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Male was all about action, heat, the sun, that kind of energy. Female represented passivity, coolness, the moon. Not meant to be taken literally, more like a symbolic way to understand how these seemingly opposite forces play together in nature.
This whole idea of opposites blending together harmoniously seems to be a recurring theme in alchemy.
It totally is. And it's really important when we get to how they viewed metals, especially their belief that all metals originally came from one primordial substance.
Wait, so gold, silver, lead,
Yeah.
all from the same source. That's a bold claim, even for alchemy.
Right, but that's what made alchemy so cool. They were all about challenging those old ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And that alleged source of all metals, none other than mercury.
Mercury, that silvery liquid metal.
The one and only. We know now about how toxic it is, but back then it seemed almost magical. I mean, liquid metal. And it could dissolve other metals almost like it was absorbing them into itself.
So they saw it as the ultimate solvent, like the universal dissolver. I can see why they were obsessed.
Totally. This ability to break those metals down into a seemingly simpler form, it made them believe that mercury was the fundamental building block. In fact, Kelly quotes a bunch of earlier alchemists who were really into this theory.
Oh, I do love a good primary source. What were these guys saying about mercury? Give me the good stuff.
Well, one quote Kelly uses from the Turba Philosophorum states, "As flesh is generated from coagulated blood, so gold is generated out of coagulated mercury."
Wow, that's quite an image. They really believed that deep down at their core, all metals were just different forms of mercury.
Totally. They imagine this whole process happening within the earth over, like, eons. Mercury undergoing this kind of digestion by fire and this gradual transformation, they thought, led to the creation of all these different metals.
Digestion by fire doesn't sound very appetizing. What did they even mean by that?
It's not like they were throwing mercury on a barbecue or anything. It's more about the slow, gradual power of heat acting on matter over a long, long time. The idea was that the intensity and duration of the heat determined which metal emerged at the end. And this brings us to a really important alchemical distinction: mature versus imperfect metals.
Mature versus imperfect metals. So even in the alchemical world, metals had a hierarchy. What made a metal worthy of the mature label?
Think of it like this. The more a metal had been digested by fire, the closer it was to, like, perfection. And I bet you can guess which metal sat at the very, very top.
Oh, it's got to be gold, right? It always comes back to gold.
Ding bing, we have a winner. Gold. The epitome of metallic perfection in their eyes. Resistant to fire, didn't tarnish easily. It was like the most mature metal out there.
The gold standard, literally. But what about those imperfect metals? Where did they fit into this alchemical equation?
And that, my friend, is where the idea of transmutation comes in. If all metals were basically just digested mercury, then in theory, you could transform one into another.
So that's how we get to the age-old dream of turning lead into gold.
You got it. It was this tantalizing possibility that fueled centuries of alchemical experiments. But it wasn't just about melting metals together. They believed it required a much deeper understanding of the forces at play within matter itself.
There's always more to it than meets the eye with alchemy. So how did they propose to actually achieve this transformation? What was their recipe for metallic perfection?
Buckle up, because this is where things get really interesting. To create the Philosopher's Stone, that ultimate goal of alchemy, the thing they believed could transmute metals, they needed a very, very special union, what alchemists called the alchemical marriage.
The alchemical marriage. Okay, now you got my attention. Who were the lucky couple in this metallic romance? The alchemical marriage, huh? Picking up right where we left off. Last time, it seemed like creating the Philosopher's Stone involved a very important union of opposites. Tell me more about this mysterious metallic romance. Who were these star-crossed lovers?
Get ready for some serious symbolism. The alchemical marriage, it wasn't about a real wedding or anything. It was all about the fusion of those opposing forces, the blending of energies, like a cosmic power couple.
A cosmic power couple. I'm intrigued. Give me the details.
So the Philosopher's Stone, that ultimate goal, the key to transmutation in their eyes, wasn't actually a stone. It was all about a carefully prepared substance. And to create it, they wanted to bring together gold and silver.
Gold and silver. Bold choices. What made them such a good match in the alchemical world?
It wasn't just a random pairing. Gold, the most mature metal, linked with the sun, it represented that male principle for them. And silver, almost perfect, but with that cooler lunar vibe, it was the female principle.
Okay, I see the symbolism, but how do you actually marry two metals? Was there like a tiny alchemical priest involved?
Haha, not quite, but the process was pretty elaborate, no doubt about that. It definitely wasn't just melting them together. Nope, they believed in this whole intricate series of steps to purify, refine, and ultimately kind of mystically merge the very essence of gold and silver.
So more of a spiritual merging than a quick trip to the altar.
Exactly. They believed this union happened through a process they called solution. But we're not talking about your average dissolving sugar and water solution.
Right, that didn't sound very mystical. What do they mean by solution then?
Think total transformation, physically and metaphorically. Kelly actually quotes another alchemist, Rosinas. He describes it as not into water, but by a true philosophical solution into the water whence metals are extracted.
Whoa, that's pretty cryptic, even for alchemy. The water whence metals are extracted. What were they getting at there?
Remember how we were talking about mercury being the first matter of metals?
Right, like their alchemical origin story.
Exactly. This philosophical solution, it wasn't about dissolving gold and silver in the normal sense. It was about reducing them to their most basic, fundamental state, that water whence metals are extracted. Basically getting them back to their purest form, back to mercury as they understood it.
So almost like hitting the reset button on these metals, stripping away all those individual characteristics to find their common ground, their shared origin.
That's one way to put it. It's as if they wanted to create like an alchemical blank slate, something ready to be imprinted with the properties of that Philosopher's Stone.
This wasn't a one-and-done process, though, right? Weren't there multiple stages of solution?
3 stages, to be exact. Though Kelly and those alchemists, he quotes, they weren't exactly straightforward with the details. Lots of riddles and symbols, which, can be a bit annoying for us now.
And that's part of the fun, right? Trying to decode their secret language, solve the puzzle.
Keeps things interesting, for sure. We can figure some things out from the terms they use. A lot of alchemists talk about calcination as a key process.
Calcination. Sounds intense. What did that involve?
It was intense. Basically, you heat a substance over an open flame, like for a long time, often until it turns to ash or powder.
They were basically incinerating these precious metals. Why destroy something so valuable? What was the point?
It wasn't about destruction, it was about purification. They thought by blasting something with that intense heat, you could burn away all the impurities, all those imperfections, and what you're left with. Pure essence.
So refining it through trial by fire. Literally.
Exactly. That idea of getting rid of obstacles to reach perfection, that was huge for them. And it wasn't just about the physical stuff either. It was like a reflection of how they viewed inner purification too.
There's that link again. The outer work in the lab mirroring the inner work of, like, self-improvement.
Totally. And remember how Kelly warned against taking shortcuts or forcing things artificially?
Right. Working with nature, not against it.
He really believed that true alchemy had to be in tune with the natural order, respecting each element's inherent properties.
No cheating the system, even in alchemy.
Nope. It's all about understanding and working within the rules of nature.
This whole focus on natural processes, it makes you wonder, did the alchemists ever feel like they were playing God a little bit?
That is the million-dollar question. On one hand, they had this deep respect for nature's power, for all its mystery. They saw themselves as students, trying to learn from the master, so to speak. But at the same time, they also believed humans could be part of the creative process.
So they walked a fine line between reverence and ambition, huh?
Exactly. And that tension, that duality, it's part of what makes alchemy so fascinating even now. It's like a mirror to our own weird relationship with the natural world.
This whole alchemical marriage thing, this idea of solution, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff. But I have a feeling there's even more to this Philosopher's Stone business, isn't there? Back for more alchemical adventures with Sir Edward Kelly. And you know what's been on my mind? That whole shadow thing?
Ah, yes, the shadow.
What was Kelly getting at there? Connecting the shadow to the alchemical process. It's giving more therapy speak than alchemy lab.
You're onto something there. This is where Kelly's work takes us deep, deep into the philosophical side of things. When he says shadow, it's not just about literal darkness, It's more like what psychologists like Carl Jung talked about, those hidden parts of ourselves, the unconscious stuff.
The stuff we try to hide, those flaws and imperfections we don't want to deal with.
Exactly. And alchemists, just like psychologists, believe that to be whole, you got to recognize and integrate that shadow side. It wasn't just about transforming matter out there. It was about personal transformation, too.
Are you saying they thought there was a connection between facing your own inner demons and, like, creating something as powerful as the Philosopher's Stone?
That's the gist of it. Outer transformation. It had to be matched by inner transformation. To create something pure and perfect, well, they had to confront and refine those imperfect shadow parts of themselves first.
So no shortcuts to enlightenment, even in alchemy. You got to face the darkness to reach the light.
They didn't shy away from it, that's for sure. There's this great line Kelly quotes from The Sounding of the Trumpet that gets right to the heart of it. The foundation of our art is gold and its shadow.
Gold and its shadow.
Yeah.
Simple, but it really makes you think. What's the deeper meaning there?
It tells us even gold, that ultimate symbol of perfection, has a hidden side. Alchemists, they knew they couldn't just focus on the shiny stuff. To really understand and use its power, they had to acknowledge that darker, less refined aspect too.
It makes you think about how we're always trying to put on a perfect face for the world, hide our flaws. But the alchemists, they understood that true understanding comes from accepting both the light and the shadow within ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And it wasn't just a philosophical idea for them, it played right into their experiments too. Remember Kelly's thing about using natural substances as they are? No messing with them.
Right, no shortcuts, no artificial stuff. Work with what nature gives you.
That respect for nature. It meant acknowledging that duality within everything. They didn't just try to isolate the purest parts of their ingredients. They knew those shadow elements were just as important.
Finding that balance, working with nature's complexity, not trying to force it into a box.
Exactly. And that's something we can all learn from even now. True progress, real transformation, it comes from understanding and accepting every part of ourselves and the world around us. Not about chasing some impossible ideal, but embracing how things really are.
It's mind-blowing that these guys, back in their labs with their potions and powders, were wrestling with these huge questions. Gives a whole new meaning to alchemy.
It really does. It reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge, it's a journey inward just as much as it is outward.
So true. And on that note, it seems we've reached the end of our alchemical journey with Sir Edward Kelly.
But like any good adventure, it leaves us with more to ponder, new mysteries to unravel.
To everyone listening, keep those metaphorical furnaces burning. Never stop exploring, and who knows what alchemical secrets you might unlock in yourselves and the world around you. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.